In a Star Tribune article by Paul Wallish, police fear that 3 deaths have been linked to fentanyl-laced heroin. Additionally, in March 2016, there has been 6 overdoses of patients from publicly funded rehab facilities that were let out before they were deemed safe. This was a problem because this was a problem due to lack of funding, and one of those people, Sean Hansen, overdosed the next day. Well, why should we care about these addicts? Aren't they just criminals? Well, we should, because they're people and they have a problem, and it's not a criminal problem, it's a mental problem. They would get the help if they could, but they can't. So what can we do? The Fargo-Moorhead area has a growing heroin and fentanyl epidemic, and we need to increase funding for rehab facilities and awareness. Today, we're going to go over the problems that address the problems that go along with fentanyl and heroin and how it affects the community, discuss the signs of fentanyl and heroin abuse, and finally, we will discuss actions we can take to prevent further addiction. I would like to transition to my first point. The Fargo-Moorhead area is seeing the worst epidemic of heroin and fentanyl it has ever seen. In 2016 alone, there's been more than 20 overdose deaths, and this has never been seen before in Fargo-Moorhead, and this is the most deaths that's ever happened in a single year. Obviously, this is a problem. And the reason behind many of these lethal deaths is because heroin is now laced with fentanyl, which is quite literally 100 times more potent than heroin, and this makes it an issue for medics to revive the overdose patients because fentanyl requires different precautions and medications to treat it. Another reason why the fentanyl and heroin epidemic is growing so fast is the increase of prescription drugs. This is the #1 gateway to heroin. This brings us to our next point, which Megan will discuss.
Okay, so prescription drug addicts, or most addicts, start off with prescription drugs like oxycodone, oxycontin, morphine, hydrocodone, and stuff like that. And like a lot of the signs of prescription drug use is using pills a lot longer than they're supposed to be taken, or taking a lot more than they're supposed to be taken along with it. And a lot of the reasons that prescription drug addicts turn into heroin addicts is because they're all opiates, and you get about the same kind of high from them. And they're also very cheap. Like heroin's a lot cheaper than prescription drugs, and it's a lot more accessible to most people. So some of the long-term signs of heroin addiction and fentanyl would be like track marks, hiding them, stuff like that, disappearing for days on end, losing contact with close friends and family, and lack of appetite. And then an article about heroin addiction on Narcon.com, it says immediate signs of being on heroin is flushed skin, dilated eyes, falling in and out of consciousness randomly, decision-making and self-control deteriorates, and nausea and vomiting and fun stuff like that. Okay, and then moving on to my next point, which is about actions that we can take to stop, or more awareness about it, more like it, is making rehab centers just a little more accessible to people, just anyone basically, instead of people with insurance or people who are in federal, federal actions or whatever. And then how we can do this is increasing public funding for places like Share House and Center here in Fargo, and also increasing focus more on heroin, fentanyl, and strong, like hard drugs, instead of sending people there with like marijuana charges and stuff like that, because a lot of them end up there. And we could also increase public awareness with campaigns such as more print ads, billboards, and making less cheesy TV commercials. You guys all know the one I'm talking about, where he's like, I'm on crack cocaine, and then the nurse with the beer comes up, you know? Okay. And then now Steve will conclude our speech.
To conclude our presentation, I would like to state that the Fargo-Moorhead area has a growing heroin and fentanyl epidemic, and we need to increase funding for public rehabilitation facilities and create more awareness for the epidemic. We discussed today what makes heroin and fentanyl so dangerous, what we need to do, why we need to bring awareness to the problem and the signs of the abuse. And finally, how we can make rehab facilities and more awareness campaigns. This is a very real problem, and we all need to address it because it affects all of us and our community. We need to get this under control before it spirals out of control. In an Inform article by Robert Huber, Huber interviews a father of Adam Mell, who put it very clearly, Adam Mell, who was an overdose victim, who put it very concisely, wake up everyone, we have an epidemic on our hand.